Hi, everybody. I'm going to give it a few minutes just as we wait for people to log in. I can see there's lots of people joining as I speak, but we are waiting for about 15 to 20 people. So happy it's working. This time last week, I was going through a little bit of stress because the system was down, for those of you who may have been on. The whole system. Hey, Brenda. Yes, I was managing my anger, Farhan. I would actually like to say I was managing my stress so I didn't get angry. But I was definitely practicing my thinking errors, that's for sure, which is so fitting that that's what the module is, because I was definitely doing some, I can't stand it, and you'll see what we talk about today, blaming, personalizing. I was doing all of it. So good practice of or application of knowledge. So it's 10:25. I'm going to give people right till 10:30 before I officially start. Hey, Melissa. Hey, Carrie. One more minute and then we'll get started. Hope everybody gets some of this amazing weather. Hopefully you're getting amazing weather where you are. In Trenton, we're at 30 some odd degrees today. All right. Hello, Krista from Trenton, I think. All righty. It is turning to 10:30 as we speak. So welcome to Mod 4. I apologize again. Last week, the Demio platform was down and out. And although everything was loaded, ready to go at around 10 to 10, there were some fatal computer errors. So we had to reschedule. As you know, this is part of a 6-module series. And today we are going to put some of our focus on reframing thinking errors. So thank you for joining, and I do know many of you have taken part up until now. So now we get to really access some more tools as we work towards managing angry moments. So without further ado, here we go. As you've probably noted from many of our other webinars, we are required to put up this quick slide, this disclaimer about the presentation you're about to view. Just a reminder, it's the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. Any reproduction or retransmission is strictly forbidden. Some of the topics may be of sensitive nature, not appropriate for children, so we just ask for parental discretion. Understand people's stories if they happen to share, or I share a story. Please, if there's anything shared in this webinar, try to not discuss it beyond the webinar. And we are being recorded for future viewing. And we look forward to your active participation. The chat is down the right-hand side of my screen, so I can see your comments as they go in, and I do have a few colleagues on the line as well, so they may help me in managing a few of your questions, but I encourage you to participate as best as you can under the platform situation that we're in. Okay, welcome, Maria. I think everybody is online now, and what we will do is move into the next section, which, as you probably recall, is a poll. So if you give me a quick second, I'm going to share that poll so that you can fill that out. And if you wouldn't mind going ahead and answering that. Awesome. Almost 100% of the audience has answered, and we are, as we typically are week to week, we're well over 60% of the CAF community, and the balance, retired members, family members, and civilians. So thank you for participating today. Just a reminder, my name is Lisa Rafasi, and I'm part of the 8-wing HP team. Over the 6 modules, you're meeting my colleagues, Brenda Riddell and Cindy Tromp. We have 2 more after today. So between Brenda and I, we will finish out this series. Just as a reminder, the slide that you're seeing right now just outlines what we've accomplished and what we're about to accomplish over the next few weeks. If this is your first session, that's totally fine. The information, as noted, is available online as a recorded option, but certainly we believe that the tools in today's brief are applicable with or without the other modules. We do, however, encourage you to take the whole series, as we feel there's lots of great information there. All right. So we're going to get into this reframing thinking errors. We're going to identify trigger thoughts and thinking errors that lead to angry reactions. We're going to look at some coping thoughts and reframes. And we're going to give you access to a progressive muscle relaxation exercise. So just to be mindful of everything you've learned up until now and where we're headed, we're starting to construct lots of learning that hopefully you will be able to access should you ever be in a situation where you have an emotional reaction to a stress and you may become angry. In the beginning of today's presentation, somebody mentioned, was I using my anger management skills last week when we had the Demio blip? And as a rule, when we're in health promotion, as we are often reminded how great it is that we get to talk about these tools in our courses, because they are a great reminder for us. You'll see today, as we identify some trigger thoughts and thinking errors, that in fact we are using this information all the time when things may in fact present a stressful situation. So without further ado, on the next slide, you're going to see trigger thoughts and coping thoughts. So these are two things, as the slide reads. A trigger thought is something that can intensify your emotion, your physical sensation, your action, and it could allow you to create an angry response to a stressful situation. So as you recall, stress happens. We get to control how we interpret it. And if we're not able to control it, it in fact could yield a stressful situation. And this emotion of anger could also be a side effect symptom of not managing that stressor. When we look at the next definition, coping thoughts, these are things that decrease our emotional responses. It helps decrease the physiological sensations and actions, and it allows for a calm response to a stressful situation. So really important, maybe some people have a coping thought, maybe a coping word, maybe a grounding technique, something they say to themselves that immediately does, as the slide indicates, decrease your response. If anybody wants to share a coping thought that they use, or a grounding word that you use already, I would welcome that. So in the chat, perfect, great example. Renee has shared that she uses the coping thought, I'm a good person. Ted uses a rock. I often use or remind myself of all the names of my family, because it tends to calm me down and changes the response to a situation I may be having. Dan used the term, it's not worth it. Absolutely. We see that people are already, picture Winnie the Pooh. That's awesome. This is not an emergency. Walk away from it. So this is great. Really important to have coping thoughts. They are tools in our toolbox that we should have accessible to help do the opposite of what this trigger thought may in fact present to us. Okay, the next slide. So today we're going to put a lot of emphasis on thinking errors. I love this module for lots of reasons. Great reminder of really important tools. I'd also say this is something that I fall victim to a lot, where I may find myself saying or using or thinking errors that are based on inaccurate beliefs or assumptions. So I do believe that the information ahead is extremely applicable, and I'm hoping that you're able to recognize that we're in good company. We all, in fact, probably do have opportunities where we, in fact, are using thinking errors. And you're going to see on the slide, it says they become habitual. We may not even be aware that they, in fact, are taking place. That's going to be really important when you reconsider that stages of a stress response. You've seen the slide a few times in this series, and you're going to see it again today. But we, in fact, move through a stress response when a stress happens, and then, in fact, we get to interpret it. And sometimes, just out of habit, we have a go-to response, or an error, or a thought, or an assumption that actually can compound a stressful situation. What we want today is to be reminded on how we can decrease that, fix that, turn that around. Okay, so there are 10 thinking errors, and we're going to go through all of them. But these are really important to start to recall opportunities that you've had where you've used a thinking error. So for example, last Wednesday morning, around 10 to 10, when the Demio platform went down, immediately thought, I personalized. I went to number 4, and we're going to break these out and define them. But number 4 is personalizing, or blaming, I absolutely thought I've done something wrong. I've hit a wrong button. I was calling my colleagues. Is this normal? What am I seeing? It was absolutely a stressful situation. Luckily, I was able to control the anger response, but I was definitely having to work through my thinking errors because they were now contributing to a situation that was beyond my control. So here we go. We're going to go through the 10 thinking errors that may, in fact, trigger anger. So the first one, selection, attention, or blind spot. So this would be a situation where you draw a conclusion about something without any evidence to the contrary. Another example would be that you pick details out that you want to see, or something you want to fit your view of what's happened. So an example, we often hear this: I'm young, I'm healthy, drinking this much is not a problem. It's not going to affect my health. I'm young, I'm going to bounce back. We hear that people will use these excuses without any evidence to the contrary of that. The other example is, I know she's untrustworthy. I saw her talking to another guy. So no substantiation for that that thought or concept. And now what's happening is the thinking error will contribute to your anger response. So we want to recognize, wait a second, I've just had a thinking error. Okay, the next one, black and white thinking. So this one is, we just put things in an all or nothing rigid category with no varying degrees of maybe meet me halfway. So the example that the slide reads says, you're either with me or against me, or children are to be seen and not heard. So recognizing that some people have certain thoughts that in fact will contribute to a more problematic situation and a stressful response. Okay, so the third one is overgeneralizing, and we're going to have an opportunity to apply some of these. This is just introducing what each of them look like. Overgeneralizing is viewing a single event as proof that any similar event will turn out the same way. So we use words such as everybody or always or nobody and never. And we should be using words as somebody or sometimes. And when we do start to recognize this overgeneralizing, if we can catch ourselves, then obviously we can prevent this thinking error from compounding an angry response. So great example at the bottom of the slide, all police officers are bad. So you've heard the saying that we're painting people with the same brush, that if one person in a sect of society does something, we in fact let everybody be overgeneralized into that category. And factually, as a result, we are overgeneralizing, and that is working against our ability to manage a stressful situation. Okay, the next one is personalizing. So it's my fault that he didn't want to go to the movies with me. You may be in a situation, think of a time where something happened and it was for an entirely different reason, but you made it seem that you were part of the problem. So taking things personally as a threat or an insult against you when there is little evidence to support it, that's how we would define personalizing. Or you walk into a room and you have, maybe your colleagues are sitting around and you hear a snicker, 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 and you immediately assume that they were making fun of you or laughing at you or taking a jab at you. And in actual fact, it could be the opposite of that. And you've now personalized the situation, created a thinking error, which now is going to contribute to you not going to the green in a stressful situation and in fact having a stressful response. If you have any questions as we're going through these, please feel free to throw them into the chat. The next one is blaming. So blaming others or events or fate to avoid seeing your part in something. So we use this in my family all the time, where siblings may say, he made me angry. That blaming is, in fact, yes, Farhan, absolutely. We will be getting to the offering the tips on how to cope with these mistakes for sure. The blaming is, in fact, something we see people do all the time, where they may say, yeah, he made me angry. And the research suggests in this portfolio, for example, that it is not a person that makes you angry, it's your response to a situation. So there would be the substantiation for why blaming as a thinking error, we should recognize right away, because a person doesn't make you angry, a situation makes you angry. And Brenda spoke about this in, I think, Mod 1. I wouldn't have gotten reprimanded if it weren't for my supervisor. So, great example of how people want to blame someone else for something that may have in fact happened. That thinking error is going to contribute to the compounding of a stressful situation, and in fact could generate an anger. Magnifying, so blowing things. Oh, this was a third thinking error that I was using last Wednesday. And right away, I reminded myself, wow, this is awesome application of knowledge happening in the moment, trying to get on to Demio. I was saying, and Brenda, my colleague, could probably attest to this. I was saying, I can't believe this is happening. This is awful. This is terrible. People are probably trying to log on right now and they can't get on Demio. Right away, magnifying something so beyond my control or anyone's control was a waste of energy. And I was quickly reminded in 10 seconds or less that I needed to get a control of that thought. My thought, in fact, was generating a different response than was applicable for the situation. The example on the slide says dinner was supposed to be ready at 6, not 6:10. This is going to ruin me. Oh, we've heard that a lot in my house recently, and I have to be careful because I realize my house is full of people. So sometimes when we present, we use our family members as examples because we're in the classroom at work and they're nowhere around. So if my son comes in and says, stop talking about me, I'll apologize ahead of time. But we run through this all the time where we'll say dinner's at 6, please make sure everybody's around available for dinner at 6. And all of a sudden, dinner's not ready at 6. And we see the magnifying and the blowing out of proportion. So we get to be reminded that these errors in thought are not useful. Mima said, I think we grew up learning you made me angry. And that's a great point. In the chat room, she posted that. The whole concept of you made me angry is absolutely verbiage that we became accustomed to using. And we want to flip that, and we'll talk about how to reframe shortly. But we do want to flip that to the situation made me angry or created an angry response. But the situation, the stressor, we get to have control over on how we are going to react. Okay, so the next one is minimizing. So shrinking the importance of things. All I did was this, or what is the big deal? It's not a big deal. So he didn't care that I missed his birthday. He doesn't mind when I raise my voice. He didn't look scared. So we're minimizing our role in a situation and shrinking the importance of that, how that may contribute to not only my stress response, but the people that I'm liaising with. And you're going to see the beauty of thinking errors is you're going to start to see how you use them, but also how other people use them. So you're going to see it from two different versions, how it can contribute to your anger, but also the people you're liaising with and interacting with, how it's contributing to their anger. So these 10 thinking errors, it's kind of like, I liken it to, you buy a new car and now all of a sudden everybody has that car and you didn't see any of this car on the street, but now that you have one, it's everywhere. Well, now that you are reminded of what these 10 thinking errors are, you're going to start to see them and interpret them in so many of the personal interactions that we have. And this is going to be empowering for how you, in fact, can react to situations. Yes, Mima, good point. This is based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And Maria suggested the "you made me angry" concept is an attempt to push the problem onto the other person. Great point. So we are already starting to think through what these things in fact mean, and they also mean that if we continue to not recognize them, that it could generate a response that we don't want to have. Okay, the next one is musting and shoulding. You must always be in a good mood. You should always include me in your coffee runs. You must treat me well or else. So you've probably had thoughts like this. And it's important to recognize that, you know how until you get a tool or skill, or you had an opportunity to have a refresher on something, that it's very easy to lose a concept. So this would be an example that we probably have used the musting and shoulding before. It probably has contributed to our anger response, but now we are reminded of what it's doing to our interactions and how we are about to work to reframe that. The acknowledgement that it is a thinking error is more than half of the effort here. So the fact that we are recalling a couple of things already from our past or previous experiences, like the whole "you made me angry" concept, we recognize that that has become almost an autopilot for us. Hanging on to the one example for a little bit longer, that "you should always include me in your coffee runs." So lots of pressure there to think that every time somebody goes on a coffee run, that they must include them. And that musting and shoulding is definitely making that person angry, but there is the error in thinking that it's also all or nothing thinking, that there's no other alternative than "you have to get me a coffee when you go for a run." So now we start to see how unrealistic those expectations we're putting on other people, but also on how we're thinking. Okay, the next one. I cannot stand it. Believing you cannot deal with life. So nobody could stand the memories that I've had to live with every day. I absolutely cannot stand this for one more minute. So you probably can recall a time when you've heard this said, or where you've thought it, or where you've said it, or where it's been a part of a discussion or a conflict that you're working through. So this, in fact, is a triggering situation that can generate anger. So now we have to recognize that can't standing it, that concept of being not able to deal with this, is an error. And recognizing how we are using this in our conflicts. If I go quickly to the chat, Mima mentioned, "I felt left out when you don't include me in the coffee runs." Owning your feelings. This is good. Mima's already starting to look at the reframe and how we reframe a thought or a situation or an incident that took place. And it is to protect us. It is to protect us from having a stressful response, but it's also to protect us from letting this continue to happen and interfere with our interactions. So, Mario, frustration, can you elaborate on that? Nobody could stand the memories I have to live with. Okay, so "I can't stand it" is much like the frustration that people experience in certain situations. Okay, the next one. People damning and labeling. Believing that people deserve to be put down or labeled because of their actions. or putting someone else down to make yourself look better. So we often hear people say, he deserved what he got. He's such a loser. Those are things that we are actually saying, thinking cognitively, that are contributing maybe to our anger, but also when you say those things, you could be contributing to the interaction you're having. So someone deserving what they got, damning them because of their actions, what would be a great reframe on somebody who's made a mistake, deserving what he got? Any ideas? And Mario, I'll come back to your comment in just a second. So if somebody gets something that is, in this case, he deserved what he got. Maybe it was a speeding ticket. Maybe he got reprimanded at work. What would be a reframe? Yes, perfect. Renee, thank you for sharing. So a reframe would be, hope they're able to correct their bad behavior. That would be an opportunity now for you to insert a reframe to prevent the situation from being a stressful response blown out of proportion. Somebody messed up, but it doesn't mean they can't learn and change. Absolutely. Training. The person required training. They're being disciplined because of a mistake, an action, a problem, but perhaps training is going to help fix the situation. And it's an opportunity to make change. So those are great examples of reframes, putting in a different way as to not put the person down. Yeah, absolutely. And look at already just a few of the statements that people are sharing right now. As I read those, they elicit a totally different response. Now I think I'm dealing with somebody who's very compassionate, caring, understanding, doesn't look at the situation as a negative intent, that there wasn't a negative intention, that they in fact, depending on the example, they may in fact did not know that they had made an error, or that, as Ted mentioned, I believe, the whole training concept. I hear what I'm saying, what others are saying. I give my head a toss and try to see it from their side. Great comment. Putting it in a different way is to not put the person down. Being told every day by a supervisor there's something wrong with your face. Putting down in a weird way. So the supervisor, if we can go to Joanne's comment, the supervisor is or has the potential to generate angry reactions. What can we reframe about the supervisor that in fact is doing the people damning, labeling, the putting down? What could we reframe about that supervisor that would help, in fact, with the anger response to a situation? Any ideas for Joanne's example? A supervisor that is putting someone down every day and saying something wrong with your face. Absolutely. So back to someone else's example of training, that supervisor could be insecure, but perfect, this is awesome. So Farhan shared, perhaps the supervisor is insecure about their own face. They're trying to project towards you. They're not able to communicate direction well. It must be awful to feel so badly that they need to attack others. So this is great. We are already starting to see that, yes, that supervisor could generate an angry situation. Their own thinking errors could make them even more angry, but it could also have an impact on how we respond to that stressor in the workplace. And the reframe is easier said than done. We have to pick the right moment to apply the reframe, recognize what's happening, and as somebody mentioned, learn to walk away from it or to shake the head. Sorry, the chat scrolled up, so I can't remember the exact wording, but it was a good one. Give my head a bit of a shake and then sort of carry on or regroup. Okay, great. Thank you for all that input. So what we're going to do now, have your chat ready to go. We're going to do much more of what we just started doing these last few thinking errors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a statement, and what I want you to do is, in fact, answer in the chat what you think the thinking error is. Now, it could be 1 or 2 or 3. It could be a combination, so there's really no wrong answer, but we're going to try this activity. At one point, had to say it's the face. Sorry, Joanne, I'm going to come back to your chat right now. At one point, had to say it's the face I wake up with every day, but at least I don't have to look at myself. Great reframe. Definitely, though, the supervisor needs some training. For sure, they would benefit from some training. Probably don't realize how much anger and stress they're generating if that's the type of leader they are. Okay, so the activity, here we go. All you're going to have to do is just type in yes. Could we have the 10 errors up on the screen? Oh, yeah, great point. Just going to go back to that slide. Is it going to let me? I'm almost there. Sorry, it's just taking some time. I guess I was trying to click too quickly. It's almost there. There they are. Okay. Can everybody see the 10 thinking errors now? I think so. And that was a great suggestion. Okay. So first one. And if you wouldn't mind just typing away as it pops into your mind. And like I said, in some cases, there's more than one answer. Okay, first statement. I only had a couple beer. I only had a couple beer. What is that? Any ideas? Perfect. Look at that. That's awesome. Yep. Good examples where overgeneralizing. Yeah. Good. Okay, the next statement. I know you were talking about me when I was off sick. What's the thinking error? And I know you were talking about me when I was off sick. Yep, good. Personalizing. Number 3, don't worry about his truck. He's too stupid to even notice there's a scratch on it. Thinking error? Don't worry about his truck. He's too stupid to even notice that there's a scratch. Yeah, perfect. Good. This one could be damning labeling. It could also be minimizing. Good. Next statement. Arson isn't bad if the place was empty and the owners had insurance. What's the thinking error or errors? Yep. And it could also be selective attention. Perfect, Jackie. Could be blind. Yeah. It could be the blind spot, selective attention. Yep. Good. Overgeneralization. Absolutely. Okay. Next statement. I always giggle at this one. All old people drive too slowly. What is the thinking error? Overgeneralizing. That's right. That's right. And I giggle at this one because I said it once in the class and somebody said, oh, is this a true false or is it a thinking errors example? So we do see that people get to a point where their thoughts are automatic pilot, that they don't have any control over how they are going to perceive a certain situation. Okay, the next statement, very good. Next statement is, if one more thing happens, I'm going to flip out. If one more thing happens, I'm going to flip out. Perfect. Very good. We're getting this. This is awesome. Okay. The next one, the government we elected is driving us into recession. What's the thinking error? The government we elected is driving us into recession. Blaming. Yep, absolutely. Okay, next one. At the end of the day, I absolutely have to have all my paperwork cut up. At the end of the day, I absolutely have to have all my paperwork caught up. Good. Yep, musting, shoulding, black and white thinking. Good. Last two. You dragged me down. You're the problem. You dragged me down. Good. And the next one, the last one, very good. Blaming, blaming, blaming. Yep. The last one, which we hear a lot about in the workplace when we talk about sort of accepted practices. And this statement goes like this. I was only doing what they did. I was only doing what's been done forever. What's the thinking error? Yep. Blaming, black, white, and minimizing. Very good. All of those. Okay, so people are really good at recognizing what the thinking errors are. I'm just thinking, I bet you wished you had that as a handout. I will fix that towards the end. Yes, thank you, Farhead. This is such good info. I know that in health promotion, we often refer to a few of our core concepts in our courses all the time. And these are one of them where someone may say something and someone else may say, it's a thinking error. Or I just used a thinking error. So you will get to a point where you start to see it everywhere. You'll see it in emails. You'll see it in conversations. You'll see it in operating procedures. I've seen an SOP that said, for the historically, this is how we have done this process historically. So that is in fact an example of how we absolutely, without any substantiation of coming up with another reason to do something a certain way, we go with a blind spot. All righty. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so the next slide, I have to get through. Sorry, I'm just going to get through back on track where we were. Bear with me for a second. I can't go click crazy here. The reframing. So changing the way that we think from focusing on the negative aspect of a situation to look at a situation in a more positive and realistic way. So if we can use the example of the supervisor for a second, the not so great supervisor, let's be honest, and I just used a thinking error there. The supervisor that requires some training, the supervisor that in fact needs some tools to recognize what they are doing. So there, you'll notice we are forever using by default a thought process that could generate anger, but could also compound a situation. So we want to reframe to promote coping and problem-solving behavior. So reframing thinking errors, really important tool. And yes, Mario, that supervisor. Oh, can anybody else not see the slide? I only have the slide number. Ted, maybe do a quick refresh. No, good. Something must have happened, Ted, to your screen. I think everybody else's. Okay, good. I'm sorry, Ted, that's happened. I'm not quite sure. Maybe your computer is frozen a bit. If you wouldn't mind troubleshooting and maybe just doing or waiting for your screen to refresh. Okay, so So now we're going to just talk about the reframe. Does anybody have an example, an easy example that they want to share, and we can use that? We've already had some really good ones. Anybody have an example of a situation where they had to come up with a more positive and realistic way of changing our, well, we're all living a great example right now where we're having to maybe change our focus from a negative aspect to a global pandemic, for example, and looking at the situation positively and realistically. But does anybody have one they'd like to share? If not, I have a couple in my back pocket, but I will welcome your input. A situation or a stress that's happened that you had to work to reframe. Okay, so we'll go with the situation that we're in right now. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Maria, for sharing. That's awesome. When my husband makes comments, thank you, Ted. That's good. My husband makes comments that would trigger me. I've learned to use laughter. Awesome. So if somebody's trying to rib at you, and you know that it has the potential to generate an angry response, immediately just giggling, laughing to yourself, not only reframes you positively, but we know by default that laughter generates a relaxation response. So that's a great reframe. People who squeeze by you in the grocery store. Okay, what would be something, and anybody chime in, what would be something you could do for a reframe to deal with that situation more positively or realistically? What could you say maybe about why that person might be squeezing by you? Why would they be kind of impolite? They must be really hungry. That's good. They were not looking. They wanted the last of it. See, this is awesome. This is now going to change my perspective at the grocery store because dealing with egotistical people at work who think they're better than everyone else. Okay, there's one we can sink our teeth into. What could we right away, we're gonna put some emphasis on the egotistical piece, right? We're gonna reframe that they have maybe a personality concern that is dictating how they behave and how they perceive themselves, but recognizing, would there be anything positive about their personality? You could say something to yourself that, well, at least they don't lack self-confidence. They have a lot of confidence. That's going to bode them well at some point in their life. But at work, recognizing that we just have to work on a reframe. Okay, Jeremy's just written a question. So, how much of this is becoming complacent versus anger management? Like, if a supervisor is talking about how your face looks, that's 100% not okay. Reframing your thoughts, absolutely. So, that and at no time would we excuse that behavior. Um, if this is okay, let's go back to a situation like that happens. We are going to take that very seriously, and we are going to use the resources for a supervisor that is, as you mentioned, clearly harassing. And I wasn't sure how serious of a situation the example was, in that there was ill intention, or this is the way that person joked. The person had been told that this wasn't appropriate behavior, that this had been recorded somewhere, that there were other people at the workplace experiencing it. So, absolutely, to your point, Jeremy, we don't tolerate bad behavior, but in some cases, there will be situations, not maybe this example, where there is an opportunity for us to reframe or for us to take a look at the thinking error. Okay, it was loud in my house. I was blaming my family for not having a quiet place. I decided to take the computer on the porch and enjoy. So perfect. Great opportunity of an example that could cause a negative situation, and your reframe is actually a timeout or a pause. Joanne gave an example, spouse working from home. Now we have to get used to being together 24/7. It was bumpy as there seems to be expectations. Absolutely. And so the reframe was what? Coming up with some clear expectations of who does what? Absolutely. Using, and sorry, my chat, I'm going to just have to refresh it because it's disappearing on me. Okay, there we go. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. If we go back to the grocery store example, that person wasn't thinking. It's an activity where we're self-absorbed. It was loud in my house. I was blaming my family for not having a quiet place. I decided to take the computer out on the porch and enjoy the nice day while listening to the webinar. Yep, good. Those are good reframes. We talked about the spouse and I both working from home. Okay, so the spouse, let's go with that one for a bit. A reframe a thinking error. Brenda added using some assertive communication. In fact, having a discussion, and we're going to talk about the desk script next week, I believe, where we're going to, no, yeah, we are. Is that right, Brenda? Are we doing the desk script next module? But another tool where we, in fact, can look at maybe having a difficult conversation and recognizing some of the things to take with you into that conversation. So if you knew you had to have assertive communication with your spouse about boundaries and working from home together, making sure that you were using the right selective language, you were practicing positive communication styles, you were engaging in active listening, and you're going to see that we will develop a bit of a script that in fact should help you if it is a problematic or concerning discussion. Sorry, just reading through. Brenda, okay. Mario said, in my case, it's led to confrontation where people were called into step before a fight. Okay. So there are some more serious angry situations that we're seeing. Ilana mentioned an example of that scenario, not okay. Toxic workplaces victims are often blamed for overreacting to unacceptable behavior. And Brenda has reminded us that our reframing allows it not to impact us any further than it already is, which needs to be actioned by leadership, chain of command, our resources, our HECOs, the various people in positions of authority that can help work us through that. So there's two different things happening. We still have to control the anger that could be generated in a situation that, albeit, is not acceptable. The other part of that is we have to deal with the behavior that's not acceptable. Let's protect ourselves first by knowing what thinking errors are, recognizing how that can make the situation worse, but let's not forget that concurrently we have to deal with this situation. I'm just getting caught up on the chat. Be clear about expectations and communication. Absolutely. Communication with spouse is key. Boundaries, expectations. Yeah, great reframing ideas. So thank you. No bad juju in the kitchen. Move the office space from the kitchen to the desert. Now, those are good. So I think we can probably all sense that there were situations that we've dealt with over the last couple months that had the potential to not only cause stress, but also result in anger as an emotion. And that's going to be important to be reminded of, that we want to minimize anger, because remember the piece on the costs of anger. There are a lot of costs to being angry, and we did that back in one of the earlier modules. So recognizing that this is constructing a whole bunch of layers of knowledge that we may have already had, but that we may have to be reminded of if we continue to have to work through troubling situations, which might be imminent because unfortunately that is life at times. Mima suggested, what about conflict avoidant people who stonewall or refuse to discuss certain issues because of their inability? Yeah. Okay, that's a problematic one. People who still want to, or people who refuse to discuss should still have to be held accountable for poor behavior. So conflict avoidant people, that is not a solution to getting conflicts solved. So we may, in that case, may have to call upon other external resources. And luckily in our organization, we are very much equipped with employee assistance programs, with the DRC, dispute resolution. We have harassment advisors. We have the MFRC that has lots of additional resources, but absolutely the conflict avoidant people. I think that's taking us a little bit away from the reframe concept right now, but I think there's an opportunity for us to talk about those things as we work through having a difficult conversation and coming up with a script for what that should or could look like. So letting anger go so doesn't build over time. Mario has, and Farhan, I don't want to dismiss the conflict avoidant comment, but I do think that as we go through it in a sequential manner, our modules, that we may in fact find that there are some tools at the end of the series that when we look at it at a broad view, could help those situations. ADR. Yes. Okay, so the reframe. With just a few minutes left, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to apply some of this. And thank you, Farhan, for ADR, alternate dispute resolution. Okay, so this particular slide says people shouldn't drive if they're going too slowly. So there's the trigger thought. Either you thought it, maybe you even heard it, maybe you said it. The thinking error is must and should. And the reframe, as an example, is sometimes people drive slowly for a good reason. Maybe they're just learning. Maybe it's not their regular vehicle. Maybe they've been in an accident in the last month. So these are all things that can help you control the response of the stress that takes place. So that would be one example. Another one, trigger thought. You're an idiot. You're always messing things up. Thinking error, labeling. So that's going to cause concern. Reframe, what you could think is this was an accident and people make mistakes. So we were on a training session once where we had somebody remind us of the concept of positive intention. Don't always assume that people are doing things with an ill intent, that they may in fact be trying. And this reminds me of that concept, that don't assume the person didn't try, that they in fact made a mistake because they really just didn't know better, didn't understand. And that switch or reframe can be very beneficial to a generated situation. Should one repeat that over and over when a situation occurs to change your mind, habit, thinking? Yeah, I think you are referring to, are you referring to the situation with work and the supervisor? Oh, the reframe. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for clarifying. And yes, in some cases, it will require you to say, this was just a mistake. People make mistakes. Stop blaming, stop labeling. stop people damning, that in fact could have just been an accident. So yeah, great example of how you could use it. Say it to yourself over and over again. Thank you, Farhan. Okay, the next example is a trigger thought. This is going to ruin me. This is the worst thing ever. This is going to ruin me. That's what you're saying, thinking, hearing. The air is magnifying. The reframe is, I've made money before. I can make it again. Or I'm going to get through this. This is not going to ruin me. If anything, it's going to recruit my resilience skills. It's going to require me to be stronger, but this is not going to take me down. This is not going to ruin me. I'm in fact going to be okay. And there would be an example of what Farhan just said, saying certain things over and over to yourself to lessen the situation and control it. Another example, I can't stand the pressure. I absolutely can't stand it. The reframe, I'm under a lot of stress right now, but I think I might be able to handle this. And then someone may also say, what tools do I need? What haven't I thought of? What can I lean on right now because of this pressure? Who are my resources? So sometimes the reframe is a whole bunch of questions, self-reflection on what you need. Now, that could be easier said than done, especially if you're in an anger-generating situation, for you have a calm pause where you actually are that thoughtful of the things that you need to consider. So recognizing that this is going to take some practice. This isn't going to all of a sudden happen tomorrow. You'll need to practice some of these skills. So this slide reminds us the middle part, the mental filter, the trigger, the thoughts, the thinking errors. That's where it happens, is right at the filter. A stress we can't control. A lot of times it's an external stress. Something happens, you have no control over it. How we filter it, interpret it, and judge it, that's where we get the control. So this part is really important, where we recognize that the thinking errors can happen and shoot us right up to the top of the red there, the not managing the stress, and then we end up responding with anger. The green, we use our positive coping thoughts, we use our reframes, we recognize that those are thinking errors, and we manage it with stress. So a bit of a reflection as we get to the end of this session. Thinking errors are patterns of negative thinking that lead to aggressive behavior. So being aware of those patterns, and they may be truly that, automatic pilots that you didn't intentionally go there, but kind of like Mima's comment where she suggested we grew up thinking that that person made me angry. We're going to have to take a look at those patterns and recognize how powerful they are so that we can get some control over them. So the summary of what we've done today of Mod 4, trigger thoughts and thinking errors, we know they can lead to angry reactions. Coping thoughts and reframes can help manage anger generating situations. So on top of Mods 1, 2, and 3, and I know there's a lot of information and we're getting to the point where we're going to all put it together, the homework, I suppose, for next week would be for you to recognizing the thinking errors, recognizing what you are currently doing for a reframe, and what else you might consider as you work through any types of stress. And hopefully, if we can go back to the supervisor situation, I didn't want to minimize how profound of an example that was, but I also wasn't entirely aware of how serious the situation is, and that should not excuse that person not being held accountable for inappropriate workplace behavior. There will be examples that we see that causes stress or anger in the workplace, and although, yes, we have to have our skills and our tools, we also have to have our resources for when we recognize that it's not acceptable. And yes, it will contribute to a stressful situation, but we have to get the control back by making sure certain people and their behaviors are managed and disciplined. I do have to do a couple of polls quickly before we finish up, and I do have to load in a handout, and I'm going to try to do that as you, in fact, wouldn't mind filling out this next poll. If you just give me one quick second, I am just trying to pop in a resource that I should have given you. And it is there now. Well, no, it's uploading. My apologies. It's a relaxation script. It's just downloading. And then I'm going to add one more because I realize that you should have all 10 on one page. So if you bear with me, and I'm sorry we're at 11:30 and I can't believe this went the full hour. I just used a whole bunch of thinking errors in there. It's just sort of downloading, so I'll go back to the polls. Okay. The next poll is about application of learning. So if you wouldn't mind filling out the poll that's just popped up. Good. Alrighty, and then I do have one more poll, and it's about the Demio platform. Sorry, one more second here. Nope, I pushed the wrong button. Sorry, it's just quickly, there we go. I'm just scrolling through this last poll, and unfortunately, it's not letting me get back. It is still downloading the relaxation script for arms, which is a really neat handout for you, and it is trying to download all the thinking errors. But what I will do, if that is something that you would like, we're going to collaborate all of the handouts for you to make sure that those are available. We have everybody's emails, but we'll also make sure that as a follow-up to the 6 modules that we'll ensure that you have what you need as far as the resources and the tools. It is still, it is finally downloaded, the relaxation script, something that I'd hoped if we had a few minutes we could go through. So just as a reminder, there are many scripts available. You can get those online. This one is just taking a look at sort of fists, forearms, shoulders, and working through a progressive muscle scan that just helps you deal with stress and work as a bit of a relaxation response exercise. Again, another handout, but also resource that hopefully you can make use of in your practice of managing stress and anger. And I think there's one more poll, and it should, there we go. I'm going to share it right now. It's about the Demio platform. Oh, no, it's not letting me get there. I'll try one more time. Okay, last one. Sorry for the technological delays. How satisfied are you with this platform? That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we're really liking this platform. I should have mentioned that when the system went down last Wednesday, they were very responsive to the concerns of National because everybody was involved trying to troubleshoot. It's a great platform for this sort of application. And thank you for taking the time to answer those questions. I'm going to go back to the chat. Any last questions as we finish up? And if not, we're nearing the end to Mod 4. I'll take a couple of minutes just to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Farhan. Tasha, yes, we are offering them again. They will be listed on our CAF Connection site, cafconnection.ca/adult/Trenton. All of the recorded ones will be there, but we're also posting them to Facebook. And if you email us, we can send you those links. And us, I'm going to just type that in. This is our email at Trenton, hptrenton2@gmail.com. Oh, thank you, Farhan. You're amazing. That's great. Okay, so I think if there aren't any other questions, I thank you for your participation today and look forward to next week. And as a reminder, homework, thinking errors, just recognizing how you're using them, when you're using them, and how you can reframe those thoughts. Have a great day, everybody. Handouts have all loaded now for those of you who may still be here. Oh, good, Alana. That's awesome.